I'm Lucy Jackson, Assistant Professor in Ancient Greek Literature.
I'm Erin Lee, Head of Archive at the National Theatre.
In this series of films, Erin and I will be looking at some of the Greek tragedies that have been staged at the National Theatre. Using the records held in the theatre's archive as a starting point, we'll look at the practicalities of staging an ancient Greek play in a modern theatre building.
The archive is home to thousands of items, from photographs to prompt scripts, technical drawings to set models, dating all the way back to our opening night in 1963. Every production has left behind some traces of the multiple artistic choices and practical considerations that go into making a performance.
By exploring these plays as staged productions, rather than as pieces of literature, we begin to see these ancient works in a new light. Going behind the scenes of the productions makes us ask fresh questions about why these plays and their myths are still relevant today.
There have been two productions of Euripides Bacchae at the National Theatre. The first was produced in 1973 and was staged in the Old Vic Theatre in a new version by the playwright, poet and future Nobel Prize winner Wole Soyinka. It was directed by Roland Joff with design by Nadine Bayliss.
The second production of the Bacchai was directed by Peter Hall, in a version by Colin Tevan, and with original music composed by Harrison Birtwistle. The designer was Alison Chitty, with masks created by Vicky Hallam. It was staged in the Olivier Theatre in 2002.
The two plays could not have been more different from one another. In this film, we'll see how the decisions made by the creative team can entirely change the focus and impact of a classic play.
In his reworking of the Bacchai, Soyinka made several changes to Euripides' text. In the play's programme, he writes about how he brought the world of ancient Greek myth into dialogue with the Yoruban gods, especially Ogun, the god of transformation, creativity, wine, and war. He also introduced a second chorus, a group of enslaved men chained together, who, in his version, spoke the majority of the chorus's lines. These changes situated the production within a contemporary discussion about colonial politics and the legacy of the Atlantic slave trade.
The prominent themes in Soyinka's Bacchai of enslavement and the subversive power of religion were built on, quite literally, by the production's set design.
The playing space is flanked on either side with metal grills. The placement of these metal structures at an angle makes the stage look like a ship. Specifically, the kind of ship which transported millions of Central and West Africans across the Atlantic Sea between the 16th and the 19th centuries. There is also a moment in this play when the god Dionysus is captured. A metal cage is used at this point, summoning the kinds of harsh restraints used by slavers.
Above the stage, there are ladders, angled to meet in the middle, forming a triangle. This shape gestures to the idea of a mountain, which is an important offstage location in Euripides' play. And it is a bit like the roof of an ancient Greek temple, tapping into those ideas of religion and the gods, their worship and their power. We also see how members of the ensemble climb up these metal structures, looking in these moments like sailors climbing a ship's rigging.
The design firmly points the audience to some reflection on this nation's historical involvement in the violent and dehumanising practice of slavery, alongside the play's own complicated discussion of religion, freedom, and the violent claims of liberation.
Mixed in with this clear aspect of the design were other non-European elements. Martin Shaw, the actor playing Dionysus, was costumed as a kind of South Asian guru. There are short essays in the programme making connections between Dionysian religion and ancient Indian tantric practices. The costume listings note that dhotis are to be worn by the chorus of slaves. In the list of musical instruments, a variety of cultures are included.
There was, then, a mix of cultures being drawn together in this production, pointing, perhaps, towards a global relevance of this one Greek tragedy.
The director Peter Hall was, by the early 2000s, famous for using masks in his productions of ancient Greek myth. The archive materials for his Bacchai give us a wonderfully evocative picture of what it was like to act in this kind of mask.
There are plenty of shots of the chorus in rehearsal and not in the mask. In these photos, we see their expressions as they act, even though their faces would have been covered in performance. We can also see some moments when they are clearly taking the mask into account in terms of how they move, turning their faces upwards in a seemingly unnatural way. When their masks are on, this unnatural posture would become eloquent and meaningful, especially when done in unison with others.
In some of the more informal rehearsal photos, we see the cast half in and half out of character. We compare these with moments when the chorus is fully masked and in performance mode, and see the huge difference in terms of their focus and their physicality. It is as if the mask changes everything about how they perform, not just how they look.
Setting some of the rehearsal photos next to the performance photos raises an interesting question about how a mask hides the identities of the performers beneath.
Covering an actor's face can help if the same actor is playing more than one part and playing a gender that is different to their own. This doubling or tripling of parts happened in this production and is also something that would have happened in ancient Greek performance practice.
There is a different kind of work done when the mask hides variety and difference amongst a group. When we look at the chorus in rehearsal and unmasked, we see the mix of women and men. But when they are masked, the audience are faced with a much more eerie, white-faced group, where one performer might not be distinguished from another. This must have been a deliberate choice for this production of the Bacchai, but it is not the only choice. Erasing the differences, particularly in our globalised modern world, creates its own peculiar effect. Perhaps it is more aesthetically striking to have everyone looking the same. On this question, the archive has no ready answers to give us.
Among the many ways to think of the role of the chorus in Greek tragedy, there is one very pragmatic contribution that they make: spectacle. They are a feast for the eyes and ears.
In the production of the Bacchai in 1973, this spectacle was achieved rather literally, with choral performers, mainly women, performing semi-nude. This seems to have been in line with a recognisably racist interpretation of West African or Oriental worship as something primitive. Such nudity on stage would have been rather shocking to many in the audience, but perhaps that was also a deliberate choice on the part of the creative team.
The spectacle in the Peter Hall production of the Bacchai was created by the sheer number of choral performers, 15 in total, and their striking costumes and masks. With such numbers, Hall was able to choreograph arresting stage pictures on the blank disc that the designer Alison Chitty used for the production. Alongside a river of fire and the impressive masks of the named characters, it was the chorus that brought visual delight to audiences. The musical delivery of their lines clearly impressed some in the audience, with one critic comparing it to the best, most hypnotically complicated rap music you have ever heard.
The National Theatre Archive really is a unique resource that allows you to get up close to all these incredible productions and unlock interpretations of classic texts that perhaps you'd never considered before.
Anyone can book a time to access the resources of the National Theatre's archive by contacting us via our website.